Thanks. I am delighted to be here, and if we could switch, yeah, good deal. We're switching to my slides and switching to the Mac. Have you ever been at a conference before where you've gotten an iPod Touch as part of the handouts? And I was just kind of overwhelmed by that, so I said, I want to do something. I want to have some kind of gift that I can offer, and we can't give it to everybody, but if you'd look under your chairs, I've got a specially marked business card. I got in here a little earlier. I got a specially marked business card under one of them. I think it's actually kind of back in there. And actually, if you have that specially marked business card under your chair, you get a free colonoscopy at Mayo Clinic. I generally like to begin my presentations first with that transition to show that I'm on a Mac, not Windows. I may look like PC, but I'm a Mac. But I also begin with my highest degree of educational attainment, which is a BS in political science, first of all, because BS and political science just kind of seem to go together. But secondly, I would feel like I had failed in my mission if you were to see what we're doing at Mayo Clinic and say, yeah, well, that's really great, but I could never do that. If a guy with a BS in political science can do this, I'm probably the least educated person in this room, and certainly the least educated person who's presented so far. So I hope that what you'll come out of this with is inspiration that, if he can do it, I can too. These gentlemen, the gentleman on your left is Dr. Charlie Mayo. The gentleman on the right is Dr. Will Mayo. They went to medical school in the 1880s, 1890s, and came back to practice in Rochester, Minnesota with their father and with the Sisters of St. Francis. And when Dr. Will and Dr. Charlie went to medical school, aseptic surgical techniques were well known. They were being taught, but they weren't being really well applied. And so the real pioneering thing that the Mayo brothers did, besides founding the first integrated group practice of medicine with multiple specialists, was they decided to start washing their hands after surgery and between surgery. And so as a result, the surgical infections that were so characteristic of the time were much less pronounced, and instead of going to the hospital to die, people actually lived to tell about it. And they were pretty excited about it. And so this is a new slide that I've just developed that is our social media equation, where S is survival, which makes people generally excited, plus the components of air, which is the social medium through which sound waves would move, leads to word of mouth. The thing that we've really emphasized at Mayo Clinic is that word of mouth has been the way our reputation's been made for 100 years, and this is just consistent with that. It's just the new way that it happens. A little bit of statistics on word of mouth at Mayo Clinic. 90% of people saying good things to a lot of friends and recommending Mayo to their friends. And then we've also done some brand research among consumers. When we ask people, if you're really sick and money was no object, where would you want to go? Essentially, they say Mayo Clinic, but these are the reasons: word of mouth, physician recommendation, which is another kind of word of mouth, and then stories in the media. Well, if you were to look at all those statistics and say, wow, then you guys must have just jumped right into like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, right? Well, that would be wrong, because we're about as risk-averse and uptight as any organization that you'd ever meet, even with those kinds of statistics. But secondly, Facebook, I started at Mayo Clinic in 2000. Facebook wasn't invented until 2004 and YouTube till 2005. So the way we started out, in responding to some of this brand data, is we said, let's create mainstream media applications, mainstream media services to affect that number two thing, the stories in the news media. So we created a weekly 90-second news package for television stations that we offered to stations on a market-exclusive basis in the US and Canada, followed up in 2004 with a radio daily 60-second segment. And so as we were thinking about how do you get into what we called new media at the time, we said, let's look at what we're already producing. And MP3, a podcast is just MP3 files with an RSS feed attached. So our first step that required literally no investment, other than a little bit of time, was to create an RSS feed for our MP3 files, our daily 60-second radio files. We posted this in the iTunes podcast directory about 2 months after that directory came up, and this was a year after podcasting had been invented. And much to our surprise, we were featured on the front page of the iTunes store. which is responsible for the fact that our downloads went from 900 a month to 74,000 a month in 1 month, which was just really helpful for us to get attention internally to say this is something to which we should devote more effort. So our second step was to go to some longer podcasts, again, reusing content that we were already producing. When we were interviewing doctors for 20 minutes for the TV segment, about 8 seconds of that in a soundbite actually got on the air. But there are 20 minutes of great conversation that if you actually have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, I just kind of like the way that rolls off my tongue. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, you'd like to hear a Mayo Clinic doctor explaining what that's all about in more depth. This is an example with our heart podcast, where the second one there, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which even though you guys are all more educated than I am, you've probably never heard of. POTS syndrome is a condition that affects primarily younger girls who wake up one day and instead of acting normally, well, anyway, instead of having their heart perform normally when they go from laying down to standing up, their heart races. And that diverts the blood to their arms and legs. They feel icky in their tummy because their digestion doesn't work right, and they go to the doctor who says, well, you're just depressed. Or, it's just, you're under stress. And it turns out that, no, actually there really is a condition that Dr. Phil Fisher has done a really great job of talking about in this podcast. It's actually our most popular podcast. More than 10,000 people have listened to that because it gets into the patient networks and they share the information. This is our Mayo Clinic Facebook fan page. When someone writes on our wall, "Thanks for saving my life," Shannon from Wisconsin says that. It's great that 300 million people can potentially see that, but what's even better is that it goes to the news feeds of her friends. This is our Mayo Clinic YouTube channel. We did some brand research and found that 39% of the respondents thought it would be great for Mayo Clinic videos to be on YouTube, and 6% thought it would be negative. So given that most politicians would kill for numbers like that, we went ahead and went forward with it. Our Mayo Clinic Twitter account has become a lot more successful since we've become more interactive. Nothing like H1N1 and the CDC, but it's been really good. And what's even better about this all is the total cost, which is, yeah. And I actually was just in Amsterdam for a presentation, and I converted that to euros, and it's the same. The key tool that makes this all possible, if you haven't seen it, and I own no stock in Cisco, which is the parent company that makes the flip video camera, is the flip video camera. Kodak has one something like this that's pretty cool too. But what's really great about it, if you haven't seen it, how many of you have one of these? Okay, good, lots of you have them. The rest of you should. Okay, the reason that's great is the built-in USB. You don't have to have a cord with you, and you can have this uploaded to YouTube within a few minutes. We had originally decided not to do blogging with our physicians because we didn't want to be depending on them for content, taking them away from patient care. But with the tripod, we're able to do our news releases better, provide audio and visual resources for pitching stories, and training all of our staff to do it, to be able to use this. So the cost for a standard definition flip video camera, and these are a little bit dated, $150 for standard definition, or for an extra $80, you can get HD, and it's really pretty amazing quality.